The king says, you need to give up your titles. This is getting ridiculous.
An unprecedented turn of events has reportedly left King Charles III in absolute fury immediately upon his return from an official tour. While the monarch was undergoing treatment for his declining health, Queen Camilla allegedly moved in secret to thrust her son Tom Parker Bowles straight into the heart of royal power under the guise of a special advisor to the king. She reportedly went as far as leading officials to believe the move had Charles's full blessing. For days, Tom brazenly attended high-level meetings, issued directives, and meddled in internal affairs, with no one daring to question his authority. However, the tables turned drastically when Charles personally reviewed the records, only to discover that not a single appointment order bore his signature. Within hours, a flurry of emergency orders was dispatched, and a top-secret meeting at Windsor Castle was instantly arranged with Michael Francis Middleton, the father of Catherine, Princess of Wales. Royal observers believe this is no ordinary summons. Instead, it is being eyed as a decisive countermove that could entirely dismantle any plot to bring the Parker Bowles clan into the inner circle of power. Has Charles prepared his ultimate counterattack to crush Camilla's ambitions once and for all? And what extraordinary role is Michael Middleton about to be handed that has Buckingham Palace shaking to its core? King Charles III, a monarch permanently weighed down by the heavy mantle of the crown and the unyielding expectations of the public, had only just returned to Buckingham Palace following a grueling, tempestuous royal tour. His body had already begun to stage a fierce rebellion. The profound exhaustion of old age, compounded by the sudden resurgence of a chronic ailment, made the sovereign's every step feel heavier than ever before. His face was deeply etched with the lines of sheer depletion, and the only thing he yearned for at this moment was a quiet twilight interval to recover his physical strength. Yet the magnificent halls of the palace had never been a place intended for true rest. The moment he stepped back into the royal study, instead of the customary state briefings, he was greeted by a classified file and the hesitant, fearful demeanor of his close, private secretary. The report detailed a shocking development that had transpired during the king's absence. Tom Parker Bowles, Queen Camilla's son from her previous marriage, had officially established himself within the palace. No longer merely a family guest dropping by as he used to. Tom was now present under an entirely new title, Special Advisor. The relationship between King Charles and Tom Parker Bowles had always maintained a level of cordial civility, a tacit compromise to preserve domestic harmony with Camilla ever since their 2005 wedding. However, for a stepson with no royal duties or lineage, a pure food critic to suddenly intervene in matters of state was entirely unprecedented. More alarming still, the report indicated that the entire staff infrastructure, from the household stewards to mid-level palace officials, had been implicitly obeying Tom's directives. Every single one of them held an absolute belief that this was the supreme will and decision formally approved by the king's own hand prior to his departure on tour. Sitting before his antique oak desk, King Charles felt a cold chill run down his spine, eclipsing even his physical pain. His exhaustion seemed to vanish, replaced instantly by a sense of profound skepticism. He immediately ordered the study to be sealed and began personally reviewing every approval file, royal decree, and signing log from the past 6 months. The monarch's trembling hands turned page after page. The solitary rustling of paper, the only sound cutting through the dead silence of the office. He scrutinized every signature, every royal seal, desperately searching for any document or brief line of text that could justify Tom's sudden authoritative presence. Yet the truth revealed itself with cold and ruthless clarity. There was no official document, nor did a single approving signature from the king exist anywhere within the British royal family's legal records regarding the name Tom Parker Bowles. A silent conflict erupted within the king's mind. His initial bewilderment quickly gave way to a deep, agonizing sense of betrayal. King Charles realized that inside one of the most heavily guarded fortresses in the world, a sophisticated power game had been orchestrated behind his back. Someone had weaponized his sovereign authority, capitalizing on his absence and failing health to arbitrarily distribute power, transforming an outsider into a shadow ruler within the palace. The king's gaze fixed blankly on the empty space ahead, his breathing growing shallow and rapid as he realized the shadow of usurpation was looming over his reign, and the mastermind behind this grand illusion was undoubtedly someone who wielded monumental influence over both him and the royal machinery. The silence enveloping King Charles III's study no longer carried the tranquil grace of a royal afternoon. Instead, it hung heavy with the suffocating pressure of a gathering storm. Holding the empty files in his hands, where his signature should have resided, had Tom Parker Bowles truly been appointed. The king felt his chest tighten. Each line of the private secretary's report struck like a hammer blow against the proud dignity of a reigning monarch. It appeared that the very moment his royal aircraft had taken off from London for his tour, Queen Camilla had immediately set to work bringing her long-held ambitions to fruition. The king reconstructed the sequence of events in meticulous detail through the cold, stark testimonies on the pages before him. Camilla, the woman who had walked alongside him through the tumultuous highs and lows of his life, had fully exploited the power vacuum he left behind. She had proactively summoned senior officials, along with the courtiers overseeing communications and human resources at Buckingham Palace, to an informal gathering. Speaking in a calm voice, imbued with the self-assured demeanor of a woman who held the sovereign's heart, Camilla had seamlessly woven her son's presence into the administrative machinery. She assured the officials that given the king's declining health following his medical setbacks in early 2024, Charles himself had issued a confidential directive to grant Tom an advisory role to alleviate the burdens of state. Driven by blind loyalty and absolute trust in the Queen's station, the palace staff harbored not a single shred of doubt. For weeks they had been transferring information, seeking counsel, and executing directives issued by Tom, effectively transforming a man without a title into the palace's shadow coordinator. The more thoroughly he grasped the depths of the matter, the more fiercely the rage erupted within King Charles, overriding even the physical pain inflicted by his chronic ailment. This was no simple misunderstanding, nor was it the over-anxious fretting of a wife caring for her husband. This was a severe abuse of power, a calculated and sophisticated usurpation of royal authority. Camilla had weaponized his name to legitimize her personal ambitions, turning the venerable palace into a springboard of influence for her own Parker Bowles clan. The king's weathered hands gripped the edge of the oak desk, his knuckles turning white with fury. He realized that if he remained silent or conceded even a single step, the very foundations of the absolute crown and the institutional legitimacy of the monarchy would be shaken to the core. Without a moment's hesitation, King Charles seized his administrative fountain pen and began signing a rapid succession of emergency decrees. His movements were decisive and forceful, a stark contrast to the frail exhaustion of an old man who had just stepped off a plane. He ordered an immediate freeze on all of Tom Parker Bowles' information access privileges, rendering null and void every decision, directive, or document issued by Tom over the past weeks. Each sharp, incisive stroke of ink that met the paper felt like a silent declaration of war, a ruthless negation of the entire charade Camilla had so painstakingly orchestrated. Yet as he set the pen down, a different sense of hollowness and unease rushed in to invade the monarch's mind. Sweeping away Tom's encroaching influence was simple enough, but the vacuum it would leave within the core of the dynasty presented a maddening riddle. Charles leaned back into his chair, his gaze drifting out the window toward the residence of the Prince of Wales. His own health was steadily deteriorating. And the monumental media pressure following consecutive royal crises was weighing heavily on the shoulders of William and Catherine. The Wales family currently resembled a lonely outpost facing a gathering storm of public scrutiny. They desperately required an advisor of true stature, someone entirely objective, standing far above internal power struggles, yet possessing absolute loyalty and deep understanding to shield them. Amidst the swirling calculus and his profound disappointment in the wife sharing his bed, King Charles's mind suddenly halted upon a single face. It was not a seasoned politician nor a nobleman boasting the proud blue blood of the British aristocracy. A humble yet steadfast and composed name suddenly crystallized with absolute clarity in the sovereign's thoughts, Michael Middleton. That man, who stood entirely outside the vortex of vanity, was somehow the most flawless answer the king was searching for to secure the future of the realm. The name Michael Middleton emerged in King Charles III's mind like a cool, soothing stream, quenching the raging fires of anger that had just consumed him. Sitting motionless in the stillness of his study, the king began to reflect on the quiet yet utterly steadfast journey of the Princess of Wales's father. Ever since William and Catherine formally wed in 2011, this middle-class man, once a flight dispatcher and later a self-made entrepreneur, had never sought to polish his own image or exploit his royal connections for personal gain. On the contrary, Michael had always chosen to remain behind the velvet curtain, maintaining a flawless distance far enough to avoid the taint of scandal, yet close enough to serve as an unshakable pillar of support for his children. During the turbulent years just past, particularly the period when the Wales family faced a relentless onslaught of international media pressure and a succession of sudden health crises, it was Michael's profound composure and rich commercial experience that helped anchor the stability of the succession line. He did not offer his children dogmatic political advice. Instead, he provided the pragmatic perspective of a father, a man who had weathered life's storms, helping William balance his heavy duties to the nation with his responsibility to shield his young family. King Charles deeply respected this integrity. Michael Middleton possessed the very asset this palace was most starved of: an objective level head and a loyal heart free from self-interest. Yet an internal conflict flared up once more within the seasoned monarch. Introducing a man completely outside the royal bloodline and peerage system into the role of a special advisor was an exceptionally hazardous gambit. Charles understood all too well the conservative rules and the walls of feudal prejudice that still ran deep within the royal household. If this decision were unveiled too soon, it would inevitably collide with fierce resistance from the old guard, and most dangerously, from Camilla. The Queen would undoubtedly weaponize every ounce of her influence to prevent a relative of the Wales family from grasping substantial authority, especially on the immediate heels of her own son's plot being dismantled. This clandestine struggle for the crown could tear apart the fragile facade of peace within the royal family. But the current predicament permitted the king neither hesitation nor weakness. His failing health compelled him to take bold steps to clear the path for William's future. Resolving to rise above the barriers of tradition, King Charles decided upon a covert strategy. Rather than utilizing the palace's standard communications network, where Camilla's eyes and ears could be anywhere, the king personally utilized an independently encrypted high-level security channel to dispatch a unique invitation. The venue for the rendezvous was not the bustling and highly scrutinized Buckingham Palace, but the ancient Windsor Castle, a symbol of royal fortification and absolute privacy. The entire meeting was ordered to be kept strictly hidden from the press and completely omitted from the master schedule to which the Queen had access. Late one afternoon, a dark vehicle bearing no royal insignia quietly crossed through a secondary security gate. Behind the tinted glass, Michael Middleton sat in silence, his demeanor as composed as ever in a tailored yet unpretentious suit. He stepped out of the car and entered the ancient castle, guided by the king's lone trusted courtier. Michael's footsteps echoed along the length of the vast stone corridors. He had been given no advance warning as to the reason for this urgent, secretive summons, completely unaware that behind the doors of the audience chamber ahead, a monumental responsibility capable of shifting the dynasty's balance of power was patiently waiting for him. The heavy wooden doors of the private audience chamber at Windsor Castle closed, cutting off the muted murmurs of the outside world and leaving behind a silence that was thoroughly suffocating. In the room bathed in the deep, warm amber glow of wall sconces, King Charles III sat in a velvet-upholstered armchair across from Michael Middleton. The encounter between the two men, a monarch carrying the destiny of a nation upon his shoulders, and a middle-class father whose children represented the very future of the realm, opened with a moment of profound, shared understanding. Stripping away unnecessary protocol, the king signaled for Michael to be seated, his eyes betraying a deep physical exhaustion, yet gleaming with an unprecedented resolve. Wasting no time in coming straight to the point of the covert meeting, King Charles formally expressed his desire to appoint Michael as a special advisor to the Wales family. As the king's low resonant words filled the room, the atmosphere seemed to solidify. Michael Middleton could not conceal his astonishment, his brows knitting slightly beneath his silvering hair. His hands clasped tightly together, resting on his knees. Hesitation and anxiety immediately flooded the mind of a man who had always chosen a quiet lifestyle. Michael understood all too well that stepping into the royal court under an official title meant being dragged into the eye of a storm fueled by power struggles, treacherous palace intrigues, and the ruthless scrutiny of the global media. He had always wished to remain a safe harbor, a tranquil sanctuary for William and Catherine to retreat to after exhausting hours, rather than a chess piece on a royal political board riddled with invisible traps. Discerning the hesitation and the warring thoughts playing out in Michael's eyes, King Charles leaned forward slightly, a gesture signifying deep trust and immense respect. The monarch's gaze locked directly onto the man opposite him, stripping away the distance of sovereign authority until only the sincerity of a father anxious for his children's future remained. The king explained that the monarchy currently stood at a treacherous historical crossroads. His failing health no longer permitted him to shield everyone, while corruptive forces and personal ambitions were actively seeking to hollow out the royal foundations from within. He assured Michael that what the crown required at this moment was not a member of the high aristocracy holding a grand title, but a heart full of calculation. Rather, it needed a person possessing innate integrity, the clear head of an entrepreneur, and an unconditionally devoted spirit. These heartfelt, candid confessions, bearing both the gravitas of a sovereign and the raw vulnerability of a father, struck the deepest chords of Michael Middleton's conscience. He saw the deep wrinkles etched across the old king's brow, witnessing the invisible weight crushing his frail shoulders. Michael's mind quickly conjured images of Catherine, his beloved daughter, whom he had always protected with all his heart, currently forced to stand resilient against the storms of the crown. And a William, his son-in-law destined to be king, who was carrying an immense mountain of pressure. If he refused, the Wales family would remain entirely solitary in the face of predatory power grabs by other factions operating right inside the palace. A gentle yet decisive sigh escaped Michael's chest. All his trepidation and fear regarding courtly turbulence vanished, replaced by an erupting instinct to protect his family and a burning sense of loyalty. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture born not of submission to absolute power, but of the acceptance of a sacred mission. That definitive movement was Michael's vow of honor that he was prepared to step out of his comfort zone, consenting to become an unshakable shield alongside King Charles to safeguard the integrity and the future of the British monarchy. The Grand Council chamber at Buckingham Palace was filled with a solemn atmosphere that was tense to the absolute breaking point. Beneath the glittering crystal chandeliers, senior palace officials, royal advisors, and ministers had all taken their seats, their faces clouded with profound anxiety. Each of them could feel the invisible weight pressing down upon the room as they looked toward King Charles III at the head of the table. Though his face still bore the lingering exhaustion of a severe illness, the monarch's gaze at this moment was as sharp and cold as a blade. Sitting beside him, Queen Camilla maintained an elegant, poised demeanor in a gown embroidered with gold thread, but her hands tightly clutching her silk clutch inadvertently betrayed the blossoming unease deep within her. Once everyone was settled, King Charles did not waste a single moment on redundant protocol. He slowly but decisively opened the administrative file placed before him. The low, authoritative voice of the sovereign rang out, shattering the silence of the room. With sharp, unshakable words, the king formally delivered a shocking announcement Tom Parker Bowles had never held and would never hold any official office position or title within the operational machinery of the British monarchy. He asserted that every arrangement, directive, or authority that Tom had arbitrarily executed over the past weeks was null void and contrary to court regulations. The king issued a supreme command demanding the immediate termination of all access privileges for the queen's stepson and his expulsion from the palace within the day. This direct and ruthless blow left the entire room stunned. Camilla felt the color completely drained from her face. Her heart tightened as she witnessed her entire plan to thrust her son into the heart of power, shattered publicly and definitively before the high ministers. Unable to contain her panic, the queen leaned slightly toward the king, her lips trembling and her eyes flashing with a mixture of pleading and resentment. She attempted, through subtle gestures and discreet touches of his hand, to explain and justify her actions, claiming they arose merely from concern for his health, wanting only to find a trusted confidant to ease her husband's burdens of state. Yet the answer to Camilla's vulnerability was absolute rejection. King Charles did not turn his head. His body remained as motionless as a stone statue, completely dismissing every tacit plea from the wife sharing his bed. His coldness was the clearest message. The sovereign's supreme authority was not a commodity to be bartered or compromised for personal affection. Without pausing, while the aftershocks of the first decision had yet to subside, King Charles delivered his second decisive strike. He turned to the next page of the document, his gaze directing toward the back of the council room, where Michael Middleton stood in silence, poised and composed. In a steely, proud voice, the king announced the appointment of Michael Middleton as the new special advisor to the Wales family. The decision sent a powerful jolt through the room, causing even the most conservative courtiers to whisper in astonishment. This was a flawless countermove that inverted the entire situation, delivering a resounding message: the crown was ready to open its doors to an upright outsider rather than tolerate the usurpation of power by an entitled relative. Camilla sat frozen in her chair, forced to helplessly witness the entire dynasty she thought she had cornered slip completely from her grasp. Every effort, every ambition to consolidate power for the Parker Bowles clan over all this time had completely collapsed in silence. As the meeting concluded, the long corridors of the palace bore witness to two profoundly contrasting scenes. In one corner of the hallway, Tom Parker Bowles quietly gathered a few personal belongings, walking with his head bowed in deep humiliation amidst the distant cold stares of the palace staff, the very people who just hours earlier had cringed before him. In the opposite direction, Michael Middleton walked with a steady, resolute stride alongside the king's trusted courtiers, preparing to assume his monumental new responsibility, closing a dark chapter of overreached power and opening a new chapter for the upright succession of the crown. The morning sunlight of a new day gently filtered through the grand glass windows of Buckingham Palace, illuminating the first steps of a new chapter in royal history. Within the office of the Wales family, Michael Middleton had officially commenced his new responsibility. Free from tumultuous welcoming ceremonies or ostentatious press releases, his presence unfolded as naturally and quietly as the man himself had for decades. Standing beside Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, during a review of the media strategy for upcoming community initiatives, Michael exuded the poised, self-assured demeanor of a seasoned entrepreneur, yet one marked by immense restraint. Every one of Michael's actions radiated caution and meticulousness. His hands turned the pages of project files, his eyes intently reviewing every minor detail of the public engagement strategy. With understanding nods and decisive gestures pointing at the master plan, he silently forged a solid defensive shield for his children against complex media traps. William looked at his father-in-law with a gaze full of respect and relief. The invisible weight pressing down on the young prince's shoulders for months seemed to ease, anchored by such a steadfast pillar of psychological support beside him. In the corner of the room, Catherine smiled softly, a tranquil smile after a long stretch of tension, as she watched her beloved father employ his integrity and experience to walk alongside her household. Meanwhile, in another quarter of the palace, the atmosphere hung thick and dismal, akin to a gray winter day. Queen Camilla sat motionless at her vanity table, her hollow gaze fixed on the empty space reflected in the grand mirror. This humiliating blemish was an indelible stain on her life of power. Every chess piece she had painstakingly positioned, every faction she had labored to construct around her son, Tom Parker Bowles, had now been completely swept away without a trace. Camilla acutely felt the unspoken estrangement from the palace staff. The downcast eyes as she passed no longer signified reverent fear, but rather the cautious avoidance shown to someone newly stripped of supreme authority. A choking sense of helplessness welled up in her throat, forcing her to swallow her pride and accept the harsh reality. The design to thrust the Parker Bowles bloodline into the heart of the dynasty's power was closed forever. Late that afternoon, King Charles III stood alone by the grand window of his library, looking out over the royal gardens. Though the king's health had not yet fully recovered his complexion, still bearing a lingering pallor, his demeanor had reclaimed the inherent majesty of a monarch. Watching the silhouette of Michael Middleton striding alongside William across the gravel paths below, discussing a charitable initiative, a rare sense of peace crept into the old sovereign's mind. Charles personally pressed the royal seal onto the final document of the working day, a definitive action that served as a resounding confirmation of this transformative decision. He knew that the choice of Michael would consume a vast amount of media ink and fuel the gossip of traditionalists, but in his heart of hearts, he harbored no regrets. This choice was entirely free from the bias of in-law relations or personal favoritism. Instead, it was built upon the rock-solid foundation of competence, integrity, and unconditional devotion, the core values Michael had proven over time. The king's gaze followed the next generation, his heart filled with faith that the future of the British monarchy would henceforth be guarded by those who truly deserved it, a realm where dynastic privilege must yield to genuine honor and loyalty. Having read the story, in your opinion, was King Charles III's covert appointment of Michael Middleton a masterstroke to safeguard the future of the monarchy? Or will it inadvertently ignite an even more ferocious shadow war with Queen Camilla's faction? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.